Digital streaming put immense market power in the hands of a small number of platforms, and Taylor Swift took them on. She played to her own tune to raise the bar in terms of what an artist can achieve. Her victories with contract negotiations, ownership rights, and concert ticket revenues have given musicians more leverage across the board, and it's all part of the attraction for the ever-growing Swifties. We'll be hearing from her fan club in Taiwan, but before that, let's get a deeper understanding of how she's shaking up the music industry and what the Swifties have to do with it. For that, we are joined by Kara Reynolds, professor of economics at the American University in Washington, D.C., and Nancy Guy, a professor in the Department of Music at the University of California, San Diego. She's also the co-director of UCSD's Center for Taiwan Studies. Kara, before we get to the power of Swifties, every business strategy has hits and misses. Is there any significant or miss that stands out to you during her career or as her own business manager?
Oh, that's a good question. We were talking earlier about how many variants she put out of her new album, and she's done the past two. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a miss. I think it maybe will remain to be seen because it's not without controversy. I think that there are some people who, view it as her taking advantage of her fans, maybe that they would, the fans feel like they need to buy as many of these different variants of albums as they can, or, buy as many different cardigans as they can. And, I have heard some complaints that maybe it's, she's reaching too much and taking advantage of the relationship she has with her fans.
And speaking of her fans, Nancy, Swift's stardom has accelerated also in quite a large part because of young women who've come to have more economic power than perhaps the previous fan base of decades ago, of female fan base. So can you tell us about the attraction to, and given that you have looked into her lyrics and words and the messaging quite carefully, to young women? You mentioned one of her songs already, but is there a wider attraction that comes into rather than, along with her messaging, but also the fact that she is taking control?
I think as we talked about, her stuff is largely autobiographical, and these people who are, so smitten with her, they want to know more about her inner world. And so they listen to these pieces for clues as to how she's really feeling about things. And again, one of the themes that kind of runs through at least the last 2/3 of her career is her, and sometimes having been wronged, treated unfairly in the media for her relationships, and going back to the song The Man, if she had all of those different conquests as a man, they'd be like, yeah, bro, good job. But her, they're going to try to shame her. And so I think that she really gives the young women a feeling of empowerment for her to take these things on, this kind of unfairness, taking it on directly. That's certainly one of the appeals.
Kara, would you like to jump in on that, on the appeal for women, particularly from the economic standpoint?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of I'm not going to call it a strategy, but when you look at Taylor's social media strategy, for example, it's very authentic, right? That people feel connected to her because she shares so much for herself, not just through the music, but through, communication on social media, dropping these hints about what's going to happen in her life. And as a result, I think her fans feel connected with her life. They want her to succeed. And because they're so kind of invested now in her happiness, that also leads to them, continuing to purchase her albums, right? So it's kind of this continuing cycle. And
speaking of that investment, please jump in, Nancy.
Oh, I was just going to say, and she sometimes communicates with her fans too, just in, that kind of reinforces this whole feeling of connection and the feeling that the connection is genuine.
I'm interested to explore a little bit more about, what entrepreneurs can take away from that, then in that case, Kara, because, we frame her as this pop star, but at the end of the day, a lot of her methodology is also a business strategy.
Absolutely. Her merchandising is so interesting to watch. Like, one of the strategies she's used is to have these kind of surprise drops. It's very much a limited edition types of, for example, sweaters, for example. I know as a mother, I kind of got in trouble one day because I got a text at 2 p.m. that's, the sweater is going to be on sale in an hour. And by the time I got home from work, it was sold out, right? So it creates this sense of shortage and that people have to jump on these sales right away. And yes, so I think entrepreneurs and marketing can take a lesson out of her playbook in terms of really successful marketing strategies and creating a sense of excitement for your product.
All right, let's go back to the fans. How do Taylor Swift's fans contribute to Swiftonomics? Well, take a look at these numbers compiled by Chicago-based data tech company Numerator. More than half the Swifties say they've spent money on Swift-related products or services. The most popular purchases were digital copies of her music. That makes up about 18% of the share. Merchandise follows at 16%. Physical copies of her music comprise 15%. What's interesting is that only 8% of the fans surveyed attended the Eras tour. Now, Ticketmaster's monopoly meltdown was, for you, I believe, a big part of your classroom teaching. And from what I understand, it was a very valuable lesson in economics. And can you tell us why you made it part of your curriculum and what's so significant about it?
Yeah, I think market power is a really big story in our economy in general, but certainly in the music industry. People have been complaining about Ticketmaster in the United States for years about the market power they have in ticket distribution and the high fees that they charge. But the Eras tour and the launch of her sales really pushed it over the edge. In that, it was a debacle in the United States when those tickets went on sale. There were fans waiting, on the phone for hours, and reports of tickets on sale on the secondary market, for $20,000 the next day. Taylor Swift came out and called out Ticketmaster for just poor performance, right? And so it wasn't the case of the fees, but when you have a monopoly controlling a market, they don't have to invest in good service either, right? So it's all tied up to their monopoly. It went before Congress, right? There were congressional hearings, and right now the U.S. antitrust authorities have filed 2 different lawsuits against Ticketmaster that aren't about Taylor Swift, but I think you could argue that Taylor Swift really launched both of those investigations, one against their monopolization of the ticket industry and one against their kind of colluding with the secondary sales, so ticket brokers and the secondary market. So this is the kind of political power, I would say, almost, that Taylor Swift also has, right? That you don't want to cross a Taylor Swift fan. Look what it can get you.
And Nancy, do you agree with that?
Yes, to put it briefly.
All right, so it's no question that Taylor Swift is big, but where does she stand in the Billboard's greatest artists of all time top 10? The Beatles come in at number 1 ahead of their contemporary rivals, the Rolling Stones, and fellow British singer Elton John, while Swift is ranked 8th. And among the female artists in the list, Mariah Carey, Madonna, and Barbra Streisand are well ahead of her. So, Nancy, as we see there, as far as, superstardom goes, Taylor Swift is still lagging behind some of the other icons. But what do you think that she's doing differently to make her, such a phenomena?
Could it be the marketing? I don't know, Kara. Honestly, I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I shouldn't say this because I'm going to upset all the Swifties. But in terms of musical skill and her voice, I can see why Barbra Streisand would be ahead of her. I don't think she has the most distinctive voice. And I asked my students about this. The reason I was interested in fandom is because I'm crazy about opera. And it was my interest in Beverly Sills, an American opera singer, that got me interested in fandom. And with her, the voice, you hear one note, you know it's her. Maria Callas, you hear one note, you know it's her. Sometimes I hear Taylor Swift and I don't even know if that's her. I have to check, you know? So I don't know. I really can't tell you what the phenomenon is, but I can see why maybe Barbara Streisand or even Mariah Carey are higher than her in this kind of ranking.
So Kara, seeing that you're wearing...
Yeah, now I'm going to be banned.
All opinions are good opinions. So Kara, seeing that you're wearing a Swiftie sweater, I believe.
I am.
Can you tell us how she managed to make these massive revenue streams? And when you compare it to other artists like Michael Jackson, everyone had their own kind of different revenue streams, but often with products, spinning off products or putting their name to endorsements, but she's managed to do it within her musical sphere.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard moving forward to compare in terms of sales, previous musical generations to this one, because the music industry is so different now, you know, that we're purely a streaming, you know, there is a small share of vinyl, but in general, the music industry is all streaming now. And so it's really hard to compare, I think, sales from pre-streaming and post-streaming. And that's why concerts are so important now, right? The live music industry has become a much bigger part of the revenue generated by the music industry than it ever was before. I will just add on to something Nancy said, though, that Taylor Swift is a workhorse. I'm not saying that these other artists are not, but if you look at how frequent she is dropping albums, I mean, I think she dropped 2 during the pandemic within like 4 months or something crazy like that, where the rest of us were home watching Netflix, right? Like she, and if it were me after the Eras tour, I would have gone on a very long vacation, and she dropped this new album. So, you know, there seems to be no stopping her. She is driven. I'll say that, like, she has something that she wants to accomplish. I think she wanted to take over the music industry and, you know, has set her sights on doing that.
I think you're absolutely right, Kara. I mean, we really have to take into consideration the changes in the music industry and that people don't buy things. I mean, after Napster, right? Starting from Napster, when people are sharing files. And to tie this back to Taiwan, in Taiwan, once people were sharing MP3 files, it was one record store after another that went down. And then with the enormous amount of piracy, one of the main reasons or ways that artists make money is through live performance. And that's especially true in mainland China. And, you know, not to get into all of that, but that's one reason Taiwan artists sometimes kowtow the way they do, because they're not going to make money if they don't perform themselves in China. And so artists that say something negative about China, they're not going to go there and make a lot of money. And so, yeah, and I don't know if you want to talk about that in this show or not, but
I think that's a whole other conversation, and I'm really glad you brought that up because, it's definitely a huge factor in the dynamics within Taiwan. So I want to bring it back to the Taiwan fans and the fact that, you know, even though Taylor Swift has never even had a concert in Taiwan, she does have a strong following. The Swift Station fan club has been growing over 10 years, and we asked its founder, Akio, how Taiwanese Swifties are fueling the global Swiftonomics boom.
Even without a concert, the impact here was kind of huge, I'd say, both economically and like culturally. So when Taylor announced her Asia tour dates, Taiwan is not included, sadly, but many Taiwanese fans didn't hesitate. Like, they booked flights to Singapore, to Japan, to Australia, just to see her live. Local business also joined in. Some bars and clubs, they have hosted like Taylor Swift theme nights. So they just play her songs the whole night, and they have like special drinks to go with it, which is really fun. And it has been like that since the Eras tour started. So the past 2 years, it has been very popular for clubs or bars to do that in Taiwan. And even some record stores here, they also set up a section just dedicated to Taylor Swift with her 12 studio albums there. And then even for like some small shops, they even started to sell friendship bracelets and the Eras Tour inspired accessories. So even though Taylor wasn't physically here, but her influence definitely like boosted tourism, entertainment, and all the retail sectors in Taiwan.
So, Kara, there we have it. Look at all the Swifties in Taiwan and how they're kind of coming together and contributing to this Swift economy. What would you say, given that you've got an entire course on this, what would you say should be the biggest takeaway for Taylor Swift's fans on how she operates, be it in the business world or personally, and for your classroom too, for your class? What do you want them to walk away with after learning about Taylor Swift?
We talked a lot about market power in the class. Taylor Swift has market power, and she's been able to use it to change some music industry practices. For example, Ticketmaster has market power, and maybe they have used it to, charge extra fees, right? So a lot of times in economics, we think about, a market-based economy and think about it as kind of operating smoothly. But one lesson that I really wanted my students to get across is the market imperfections that can be caused by market power and like how that spills over into different aspects of purchases that they're making.
And Nancy, finally, what do you think it is about Taylor Swift? Because if you look at her, just superficially from the top, she's an all-American girl from Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania for sure.
Yeah.
And then they moved down to Tennessee to be near the music industry, Nashville.
Yeah. So, she's presented just from the outset like an all-American girl, very much, appeals to the U.S. audience. But yet she manages to cross borders and borders like into Taiwan. What do you think finally is it about her that manages to do that? And in particular, from what you know in Taiwan studies, and you mentioned this briefly, what is it in her I guess the way she conducts herself that you think does appeal to Taiwan?
I guess I'd back up just a little bit and remember that American pop music has been influential around the whole world, especially, very much so in Taiwan, and has been for decades. So just from that standpoint, it wouldn't surprise me that like a top American star would have a huge following in Taiwan, and then just add her own appeal and whatever this kind of magic is that she has, this it factor that she undeniably has. Put all of that together, and it makes perfect sense to me that she would be very popular in Taiwan.
We've run out of time, but thank you both so much for this very interesting conversation and very much an education for me. Thank you, Kara Reynolds and Nancy Guy.